Hey there, it's Lara back with your weekly astrology forecast, and this one is for the week of June 2nd to the 8th, 2021. Thanks for being here. So, if you haven't yet gone over to astrologymaven.com and signed up, I'd really appreciate it if you do that. If you want to find out when my new website is launching, which is getting closer and closer, then that's the way to do it. And even if you were on my old mailing list, you still need to sign up again because I don't want to assume that people want to, still be on the list. So I want to leave that up to you. And I only want you there if you want to be there, kind of thing, right? So astrologymaven.com, the link is below. And when you do that, you'll get my free guide to working with the moon. So how's Mercury retrograde treating you? Let me tell ya, it's been an interesting one over here so far. It's been very typical in terms of a Mercury retrograde, which is no surprise, right? Mercury's in one of its home signs of Gemini, and so it's pretty true to form and pretty typical of what we would normally kind of those cliche things about Mercury retrograde, where it's like, technologies breaking down or glitches or, losing technology or miscommunications, missing details and things that you're reading or writing or communicating, all kinds of that. Vehicles, situations with vehicles, moving parts, appointments, travel, all of that stuff is pretty typical of a Mercury retrograde. And so around here, well, right now my husband is currently down in his office. They had to wipe his computer. Something happened. We don't know what exactly. It's not new, not a new computer, but it's not like ancient. And so fortunately for good friends, we have a good friend who's pretty skilled at these things and helped him out. But, so my husband hasn't really been able to work for the last couple of days because he's been dealing with this. So he's downstairs right now reinstalling all of his programs because they had to wipe everything, and oh boy. So that, and, I've been fumbling around trying to get things sorted for my new website. And it's not like really that it's been particularly frustrating. It's just that there's so many details to sort out. So this morning I was in my office here rearranging things because I was trying to come up with a setup to record a course that I'm working on, and a couple of other things. And so anyways, long story short, I ended up right back where I started. Here I am. So and I could tell you about all kinds of other stuff. But anyway, so that's what's going on here for Mercury retrograde. Tell me your Mercury retrograde woes below. This too shall pass. It's a normal thing that happens 3 or 4 times a year. It's really a call to kind of tap the brakes, right? Slow down, pay attention to the details, get it right. And in the case of my husband, he actually said this morning, he's like, well, in the long run, maybe it's not such a bad thing because now all his files are backed up and, maybe his computer will work more efficiently, that sort of thing. So that's Mercury retrograde. We're in the thick of it for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then we're also feeling the buildup of the intensity between Saturn and Uranus for the second time this year, right? So Saturn and Uranus squaring off, Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus in Taurus, those 2 fixed signs, fixed air and fixed earth, they're the background story of 2021, the background hum. And the major signature kind of thing. And so the first time these 2 planets squared off was in February of this year. And we are approaching the second exact square, which is happening next week on the 13th of June. But we're pretty much in the thick of it now. And you can really, I don't know if you can, but I certainly am noticing it in my own life, where that energy is peaking again. I'm paying attention to the houses that Saturn and Uranus sit for me, which we've covered in past videos. And if you know your chart, you'll know that. And you can kind of get a sense of how the energy is really amping up again. It's reaching this kind of crescendo again, right? And then it will wane, still be there. They never go too far out of range of each other, but it'll still be there, but then it'll reach its third and final peak in December. But this is kind of like the middle of the story that we're in right now. And so it may be perhaps the most intense of the three squares, right? So that's not technically happening till next week, like it's exact on the 13th, but it's pretty much palpable right now as well. So, in general, June, and I can't believe we're in June already, but June is a pretty big month, astrologically speaking. There's a lot of significant astrology going on. There's a lot going on in general. I already mentioned two of those things. Mercury's retrograde. We've got that Saturn-Uranus square. We have another eclipse happening next week on the 10th, and that's what we'll cover in next week's video, is the Gemini solar eclipse. We have, Venus changing signs, a pretty potent conversation going on between Mars and Pluto. Oh my gosh, what else is going on? I can't even remember all the things right now, but Saturn's retrograde, Jupiter stations retrograde. I can't remember the date, but I think it's before the end of June, if I recall. So there's a lot happening. So it's going to feel like a bit of a pivotal month in many ways. And some of it is going to feel, I think, quite welcome. And some of it's going to feel, a bit difficult and sticky and emotional. But that's life, right? You take the good, you take the bad kind of thing. And it can't be good all the time, and it's not bad all the time either. So this is a month of where we've got a bit of both in the mix. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those things in this video, and we're going to really focus on something really supportive, actually, something really, really nice that's happening this week. And it is giving us a bit of a cushion for the more difficult things. And that is the fact that that Jupiter in Pisces is going to be in a trine with Venus, who's moving into Cancer this week. So that's what we're going to focus on. For the most part, we're going to talk a bit about Mars in Cancer opposing Pluto in Capricorn as well, because that's pretty powerful energy. But just before we get there, I will mention to you where the moon is at. So we've got the moon moved into Pisces early Tuesday morning and was in Aquarius the couple days previous to that. And I don't know about you, but if you're paying attention to these things, right? And in my free guide to working with the moon, which you can get by signing up to my mailing list, and the link to that is below, it's sort of, it helps you get in the flow and to sort of start paying attention to what's going on for you and in general when the moon moves through certain, each of the signs each month. And so when the moon was in Aquarius, what I really noticed personally was it triggered that Saturn-Uranus square. So for me, those are the themes that I really noticed playing out over the couple of days that the moon was in Aquarius. And now the moon's moved into Pisces. So that's a little bit more gentle, that energy of moon in Pisces. a little more dreamy, a little more compassionate, perhaps a little more, uncertain or porous or lacking boundaries. It's a good time. Moon in Pisces is a good time for enjoying art, enjoying, movies, music, really gentle kind of, gentle things and people. And it can be also a time where, there's a bit of escapism that goes on. And Moon in Pisces can also be some days where we're feeling a little bit like foggy sometimes, right? Or we may feel a little bit more drained physically and less like we're ready to take on the world. So then, speaking of taking on the world, the moon moves into Aries on Thursday afternoon. So that is a more fiery, amped up kind of energy, right? And that may trigger the Pluto opposition to Mars that's coming up as well, because the moon will hit those points, right? So over those couple of days. And then early Sunday morning, the moon will enter Taurus, which is a lovely place for her to be. So, and then finally next Tuesday, the 8th, the moon will move into Gemini, which is prepping for that solar eclipse that's happening on the 10th, right, in Gemini, which we're going to talk about next week. So we've covered all of that and, talked a bit about Mercury retrograde and the upcoming Saturn-Uranus square. Now let's cover off the main events of this week and then dive deeper into a couple of them. And then I'll take you through each sign in terms of what's happening with that really nice aspect between Jupiter in Pisces and Venus in Cancer, and where to look for that in your own experience. So on that note, today, Wednesday, June 2nd, we have Venus moving out of Gemini and into Cancer. So Venus, the planet that speaks to, our relationships and our relationships of all kinds too, right? Not just romantic relationships, all kinds of relationships. Venus is the relational planet. Venus brings harmony, and it is really about things that feel harmonious and are pleasing, right? Aesthetically pleasing, art. Venus is about our resources. Venus rules Taurus, right? The earth sign that is very much resource based. And also Libra, which is a relational sign, right? So those are the things that Venus speaks to. And Venus is moving into this watery, emotional, nurturing sign of Cancer. And so that's really nice. Venus doesn't have any particular sort of dignity in Cancer, but it's comfortable there. Venus in a water sign is nice. It's pleasant. So Venus in Cancer is going to make this really nice conversation. Just as she tips into Cancer, she's going to come into a trine with Jupiter, who's at the first couple of degrees of Pisces right now, another water sign. So where it's at home, right? Jupiter is at home in Pisces. We've talked about this. We've talked about this is a really welcome change from where Jupiter has been over the last couple of years. And we're getting this inkling of what the longer term Jupiter in Pisces transit will be about, which doesn't start until the end of this year, because Jupiter will move back into Aquarius in July, at the end of July, as it will retrograde, right? But right now we're getting it's like faintly off in the distance. We can sense, the goodness that Jupiter in Pisces wants to bring us. And so, and when Venus comes into this conversation with Jupiter, both in water signs, it's thirst quenching, right? It's like a a dive in a beautiful, clear, cool lake after like a really hard day's physical labor sort of thing. It's a cool drink of water or your beverage of choice when you're really parched. It's moving into maybe some air conditioning after you've just been like, maybe on a sweaty road trip with no air conditioning in the vehicles, like we used to have to do when we were kids, that kind of thing. So you get this sense of it's quenching, right? And trines are conversations that are harmonious and flowing, and they are supportive and helpful and easy, as opposed to, say, a square, right? Or an opposition, which are more tense conversations between the planets. So we've got these two benefics. Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics, right? They bring the goodness. And they are in this supportive, easy, flowing, harmonious conversation. So this is fantastic. And another thing to note is that not only is Jupiter's at home in Pisces, right? But Jupiter is also exalted in the sign of Cancer. And Venus, who's in Cancer at the time of this conversation, is exalted in the sign of Pisces. So there's this extra layer of like harmony and support and lifting up going on between these two planets. So this is a really, really nice thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that before I take you through the signs, but I've given you, the really good news, and now I want to talk to you a little bit about something that's happening that is maybe not so comfortable. So we've got, there's a couple things happening before I even get there. First, I'll just mention to you that on that same day, on the 3rd, right? So Thursday, we've got the Sun in Gemini trining Saturn, who's retrograde in Aquarius at about 13 degrees. So a trine is a conversation of support, of ease, right? That I just mentioned to you. It's harmonious conversation between the two planetary bodies involved. And in this case, that's the Sun. The Sun is our motivation. The Sun is the ideal kind of thing. And obviously the Sun is the light giver, right? And the Sun is in a trine with Saturn. So this is, perhaps shining some helpful light on the Saturn Aquarius situation, giving us some motivation to deal with that Saturn in Aquarius, which is squaring Uranus and Taurus, right? Really, we could also see, like, on a less personal level, things revolving around leaders or authority figures, and leadership that is more harmonious, more like there may be a bit of something involving like tradition or structures or boundaries or even karma. Saturn's the lord of karma, and the Sun over there in Gemini is bringing, like, enlightening us with maybe some information around those things. So that's I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that's Sun in Gemini trining Saturn retrograde in Aquarius. And then on the 5th, on Saturday, we've got Mercury retrograde in Gemini, squaring Neptune in Pisces. So Neptune is also in Pisces, right? Neptune is, well, in modern astrology, Neptune's considered the modern ruler of Pisces. I see it more these days as Neptune having an affinity with Pisces, and Jupiter rules Pisces. And so, nevertheless, both Jupiter and Neptune are in Pisces right now. And Neptune square Pisces, I've talked quite a bit about this in the past, actually, because it's a configuration I have in my own chart. It's not super tight, but it's close enough. It's within like 6 degrees. And so I'm familiar with this, but this Mercury, and I've spoken about it recently because Mercury retrograde is triggering this square to Neptune a few times, right? And so it's worth taking note, because it's not going to be just like sort of one hit. It's this is the second hit, and then when Mercury stations, it will happen again. So, there's this element with Mercury square Neptune of things like, and this is happening at 23 degrees, incidentally, of the mutable signs, right? Of Gemini and Pisces. So if you have anything around 23 degrees of Gemini, Pisces, or Virgo, or Sagittarius, this will sort of impact you on a more personal level. So things like, confusion around communication, or uncertainty or lack of clarity around communication, around ideas, around travel, around commerce, around, movement in a sense, around teaching, or there can be like fuzziness around that, right? Neptune puts this kind of like veil over things. And so with Mercury retrograde in Gemini, we can try to be kind of weeding through the Neptunian waters sort of thing, and trying to kind of find our way. And we just have to be like, it's almost like this lack of, am I understanding correctly? Or is this, like, for example, last night, a friend of mine messaged me and was like, is the lockdown over this week? Or it's like, I don't know, like, who knows anymore around here? It's like, and I said, I responded, like, F if I know, and that it seems like the answer is simultaneously yes and no. If you read, what's going on is, yeah. So it's a bit head spinning. And so that Mercury square Neptune, is reflective of that. But what it's really nice for is things like artistic expression. Mercury square Neptune is very much symbolic thinking. It's seeing things in and this is something that, I have personal experience with. It's almost like sometimes there's like thinking in images, or communication that doesn't happen in sort of traditional ways. Like, it might not be that the spoken word conversation. It can be, things that come through dreams, or poetry, music, lyrics, that kind of thing, movies, that kind of creative expression. So Mercury square Neptune is, and I think I went through, seems to me I might have gone through some people in a recent video that have this aspect to give you an idea. And it's people like Bob Dylan, and I'm trying to think of who else is on that list. There was quite a few people. I did that in a video recently, so you can go back and I'll link to it below if you want to go back and listen to that. Okay, so now let's get to the other thing that's happening on that day. I believe it's that same day that this is happening. We've got on Saturday the 5th, Mars in Cancer is opposing Pluto in Capricorn at 26 degrees. And so this is, again, one of those things where we're feeling it. We're feeling it now because we're we're almost there. And it's one of those things that, like, it can be conflated or confused, or with the Saturn Uranus energy, if we don't really know sort of where this is happening in our chart. But in some ways it can have a bit of a similar vibe. So first of all, let me say that if you're somebody that has personal planets, if you have your sun, your moon, your rising, your Venus, your Mercury, your Mars, and on that note, it's so funny, we were having a conversation last night at dinner, and anyways, long and the short of it is, my daughter goes, yeah, do you know my big six? And I was like, what? Your big six? What's your big six? And anyway, she's like, her cousin has this app on her phone, and about the big six. And then my son goes, oh yeah, so-and-so, a friend of his, has this app on her phone as well. And I'm like, big six. And then it dawned on me, what they're talking about is, your personal planets. And so generally, the sun, the moon, the rising sign are often referred to as the big three these days. And where people used to only know their sun sign, a lot more people are getting, astrologically savvy, and they now know their rising and their moon sign too. But apparently, at least among some, the youth sort of thing, it's becoming more popular to also know what sign your Venus and your Mars and your Mercury are in. So that's really interesting. I thought that was pretty cool when I finally figured out, when it dawned on me what they were talking about. The only thing I will say about that is, one thing I have noticed is with the popularization of astrology, it's really becoming more and more popular, and a lot of young people are really taking an interest, which is fantastic. But unfortunately, there's a lot of plonk out there, right? Like, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of nonsense. And, there's a lot of memes and stuff, which can be funny and fun and everything. And that's all fine. But there is a lot of, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of people that are giving advice and things like that maybe shouldn't be, because they don't really have the background or the knowledge base to do that. And everybody has to learn, everybody has to start somewhere, but it concerns me sometimes, because you don't want to say something to somebody that is going to be damaging. Like, it's all about the ethics of astrology, which is a big topic these days. So anyway, but I'm going off on all the tangents today, right? So anyway, this whole notion of the big six, right? So what I started to say, to circle back, is that, so here's Mercury Neptune square. Can you see? I'm all over the map. Is that if you have planets around the 26 degree mark of Capricorn or Cancer, or the other two cardinal signs, which are Aries and Libra, then this Mars-Pluto opposition will likely be felt by you more personally, right? Whenever something triggers personal, like, points in our chart, if it's on an angle, or if it's hitting your rising sign or whatever, then that's more personal to you. The rest of us, I shouldn't say us, because I do have something within a few degrees of this opposition. But the rest of the folks will feel it or witness it sort of on a more collective level, right? Like, and so, and what, when I say, well, feel it or witness it, what is it? Because I haven't really talked about, like, okay, well, what is Mars, Pluto? What's going on here? So Mars is currently in Cancer, and on Saturday will be, 26 degrees, and Pluto is in Capricorn opposite Cancer. Capricorn is Cancer's opposite sign at 26 degrees. Pluto's been in Capricorn for a while and is there for 2 or 3 years, finishing up that business of deep sort of restructuring, transformation, composting, in the Capricorn area of our charts, and just in general around Capricorn themes, right? Around the traditional structures and institutions and all that when we're talking on a more mundane level. So what's happening here is these two planets are facing off. And so this, Mars, god of war, Mars, our ambition and drive and will and force, and this yang sort of going after what we want energy is opposing Pluto, Lord of the Underworld. Pluto, which is like nuclear power kind of thing, which is, Pluto hauls things up from the depths because they need to be witnessed, or they need to be released or transformed or composted in some way. And so we've got these energies, right? That's pretty combustible energy. So we have these this conversation going on that is it can be volatile. We can see power struggles. It can be this really, really emotional release of pressure. Mars is in Cancer, an emotional water sign, a sensitive water sign, a water sign that is protective of tribe and that kind of thing, and protective of emotions as well. Cancer is the symbol of the crab, right? And I always say it's got a tough exterior, but it's sort of soft and mushy on the inside, right? And crabs will either sort of skitter away into their homes to protect themselves from threats, or if they don't have a choice, the pinchers come out, right? So, and they're kind of elusive. They go sideways, and so that symbolism is obviously relevant here. Mars is in Cancer, so and Pluto's in Capricorn. There can be this it's like a pressure valve being released, on a pressure cooker or something like that. It can be like an explosion of pent-up emotions, a really intense emergence of something from under the surface. That could be something unconscious. It could be like a secret, but it's like this, I get this image of like an underwater volcano sort of exploding, right? That it's cardinal earth energy with Pluto and Capricorn facing off with cardinal water energy. And the cardinal signs are the initiators, right? There's this impulsiveness. So it's like I get this this sense of like an underwater volcano kind of exploding, but the thing is, so there can be some some fear, some pain, some grief that comes to the surface or that's experienced, but that ultimately is healing on some level, and hopefully not destructive. Although there's the potential for that, but we've got this this cushion of Venus in Cancer. So Venus has joined Mars in Cancer and then making the trine to Jupiter, right, in Pisces, and Neptune is also in Pisces. So there's a sense of a real perhaps moving through some really difficult emotions, and having to release, or having the opportunity, or being like a trigger of release in some way, and then healing can happen. So incidentally, the last time that Mars opposed Pluto was right around the time that Jeffrey Epstein and all of that was in the news. So there's themes of children and women, and we've got Mars in Cancer, right? Venus in Cancer, and then Pluto, the darker side, the secrets, and that sense of like power and control and that sort of thing, right? The really ugly side of things. So, I was hesitating to bring this up, and I'm not going to go into big details about it. But and I'm just going to give you fair warning. I don't want to trigger anybody here. I'm not going to go into a big long story, but we have a similar in the sense that like similar sort of energetically speaking, and in some ways, similar in that it involves children, and we've got some pretty awful news that broke this week in Canada, involving residential schools, and some like a gravesite that was found. Anyway, so I'm sure if you've been paying attention to the news at all, you've probably heard about it, and it's awful. That doesn't even begin to describe it, right? The history of residential schools in Canada, and the genocide, because let's call it what it is, that that took place. Anyway, sorry, it's emotional. So Mars opposing Pluto, right? We're getting this. It's awful. It's the grief. It's the pain. It's the secrets. It's literally. The whole notion of things being buried, getting uncovered, being discovered, right? Pluto. So, and Pluto opposing Mars. And so there is a lot of work that needs to be done around this, and a lot of healing, and a lot of, grief to process for many, many people, and the survivors of residential schools. And wow, sorry. Anyway, sorry about that. I'm not going to start over, but because this is real life, and I am a privileged white person who never had to endure any of that, so I can't even fathom. But I just this is exactly like I'm giving you right here sort of Mars Pluto. So this is and on a very small scale. So this is the potential, right, for Mars Pluto, this Mars Pluto opposition. And the good news is that we've got those two benefics, Venus in Cancer and Jupiter in Pisces, working together to support us and to bring a bit of a cushion and a soft place to land, and some cooling waters, and some like I started out to say at the beginning, a quenching in some way. And so that's the good part of all of this. So before I say a little bit more about that Venus in Pisces, the last thing I'm going to say about Pluto and Mars is, on a really kind of practical, mundane level, because sometimes, and increasingly so, I'm finding that I'm noticing like just how literal some of these things can be. Like just very like literal when you're talking about planetary alignments, right? And so Mars-Pluto opposition could be something like, well, some kind of like activity, like a lot of activity around water, like water sports is like Mars in Cancer. But there can be, like I wouldn't take any risks around that, around this time. It could be things like some of the things I thought of were like digging an in-ground pool. That could literally be like on a very practical, like, it doesn't always have to be a huge, big deal. Sometimes it's just it's just sort of the simplest, most straightforward, literal way that the energy plays out. So it could be digging an in-ground pool. It's funny because my sister and brother-in-law are waiting for an above-ground pool to come in, and they had to, do some stuff in their yard and that. And they are like, he's a Capricorn sun, she's a Cancer sun. So that's kind of interesting, right? But, or we could like see some kind of like, I don't know, some sort of like underwater, I keep getting this image of an underwater volcano or a geyser or something. We've got locally here. We just got news of the big mining company. Their workers are going on strike, right? The union's voted to strike. And so Mars in Cancer, it's this union activity. Like Cancer is the sign of like family. A union is kind of like that, right? It's a brotherhood, a sisterhood, that sort of thing. And then Pluto, like these people work in a mine underground. Like, so they're again very literal. Capricorn is, it's an earth sign among other things, but it's the tradition, the hierarchy, all of that. So just a couple of ways that you can see that energy playing out in a less emotionally kind of being on strike is not that it's not emotional, but in a sort of a more like I was saying, literal way. Okay, so if you know where Cancer and Capricorn are in your chart, and I'm thinking if you've been watching these videos or you've been paying attention to astrology for even the last year or so, and your chart, you'll know where Cancer, what house Cancer and Capricorn sit for you, because there's been so much activity on that axis last year, and with Saturn and Pluto, or with Saturn and Jupiter, along with Pluto moving through Capricorn, all of last year. So you can take a look at what house does Capricorn fall for me, what house does Cancer fall for me, and get a sense of the two areas of life that are like in this kind of a opposing tension, right? But again, it's only likely to be felt personally if you have something significant around that 26 degree mark of the cardinal signs. So sorry for my little breakdown. Sorry, not sorry, really. So let's talk about something let's finish off on a more positive note here. Not that it's not important to acknowledge and to address these things, right? Because if we don't do that, then no healing can happen. We can't just avoid. I wrote about this on Facebook recently. Like we can't just avoid our uncomfortable feelings and our guilt and our shame and our grief and our, all the things. We can't. We can, but it doesn't serve anybody, including ourselves. So if you want to read what I wrote about that on Facebook, you can go over to Facebook. The link to that is below and check it out. I was talking about a movie. It was in relation to the recent news of the residential school in Kamloops, and also a movie that we watched this past weekend called Jojo Rabbit. So anyway, moving on here. So this Venus in Cancer trining Jupiter in Pisces, while Neptune's also in Pisces, and Mars, is opposing Pluto, Mars in Cancer, but Mars is also trining Neptune in Pisces. So that's another cause to believe that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, regardless of sort of how off in the distance it is. And this conversation here is really this injection, like I said, of softness and a cushion for the more difficult energy, right, of Mars Pluto. So Jupiter in Pisces in a trine with Mars in Cancer, we can experience things like the healing of relationships on some level, or like jovial or harmonious associations with, family or people that feel like family, like our tribe kind of thing, or experiences of, emotional support, of nurturing, some optimism even regarding things like our resources, or which is Venusian, relationships, resources, issues around women, and sort of the more feminine things in life, art, aesthetic, beauty, that kind of thing. There can be like an increased sense of hope that we experience. There is, Jupiter in Pisces is bringing that. Like I said, it's giving us sort of a glimpse, right, into the longer term transit that will start at the end of this year. But then it's getting this boost from Venus in Cancer as well. So that's really nice. There can be like, some socializing maybe that goes on, if that's allowed, where you are, with family, with women, like I said, with tribe, people who feel like family, or support from those people. There's just this real sense of spiritual kind of harmony, or connection, going on, a healing of the past in some way, compassionate bonding between people, or groups even, depending on where this is falling in your chart. So it's like it's like a moment of divine grace almost that we can experience with these two benefics coming into this conversation with each other. And the last image I'll sort of leave you with that came to mind before I take you through the signs is that it's like there's this massive rainstorm before someone, lights a fire, or before somebody sets off fireworks, and it, like if the rain hadn't happened, then the whole forest would be on fire. But because we've had that sort of deluge, right? That all that watery energy of Pisces and Cancer, it's tamped that down. It's allowed for there to be not so much damage caused by the fire. So it's kind of like that. That's kind of what I an image that comes to mind. So let's move through each of the signs, and I'm going to speak to you about the 2 houses that Cancer and Pisces occupy in your chart, because Venus in Cancer, Mars will also be in Cancer, will be in this trine with Jupiter in Pisces, right? So look for these 2 areas of your chart, the themes that reflect these houses, to be bringing you some grace, some support, some harmony, some ease, even if there's other things going on that may be difficult. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with Cancer because, there's a lot of, Mars is in there and Venus is joining, and eventually we're going to see the sun move into your sign, and we're going to have the solstice, right? Which is the other big thing that I never mentioned. That's happening in June, but we'll talk about that in a later video. So before I actually dive right into Cancer, I just want to mention, in case this is your first time here, gosh, and if this is your first time here, I hope you don't think I'm a train wreck. Sometimes I am, right? Who isn't? But I hope you stick around. And I'd love if you would subscribe. But what I want you to know is that when you're listening to these forecasts, then listen for your rising sign first. First and foremost, when we're talking a general forecast here, that will be the most accurate and the most sort of reflective of your real life, right? And you can also listen for your sun sign and your moon sign as well. And if you don't know your rising sign or your moon sign, just listen for your sun sign, and that can also give you some information. But if you know all 3, that can give you added layers. And if you're only going to listen to one, listen for your rising sign. I am also letting you know that I'm using whole sign houses in these forecasts. And so I think that's about all I wanted to say. And I will put some timestamps for you to be able to get to your signs easily, so you don't have to listen for everybody else's. Okay, so let's begin with Cancer. It just occurred to me. Normally in these videos, I give you some questions to ponder. And I neglected to do that this time. There's a lot going on this week. I think we kind of talked about enough for you to get a sense of what are the things that you might want to be considering or reflecting on or paying attention. So I think that I'll skip that because we're almost an hour in here as well, and I'll take you through the signs and just give you an idea of, what are the houses here? What are the themes that are going to see some nice juju from Venus and Jupiter? Okay, so here we go. Cancer first. So you've got Venus in your first house. You also have Mars there, but Venus is coming in and bringing this, bringing some softness to that area where it may have been a little bit, you may have been feeling a little more inflamed with Mars in your first house. Now that Venus is coming in, and Venus is going to make this trine to Jupiter in your 9th house, which is where Pisces sits. So it's the 1st and 9th houses that are being hit by this trine for you. This can be some welcome relief. So your first house, the house of self, the house of your relationship to yourself. It's on the relationship axis, the first house. It is your physical well-being and your physical vitality, your physical appearance. It is your trajectory through life. Like, it is how you project yourself, right? Sort of out into the world and how the world perceives you. So the first house, whenever something's going on in the first house, it can impact a lot of different areas of life. So it's a big deal. But you may be feeling more in harmony with yourself than you have in a while. With Venus moving into your first house, you may be getting some a boost to how you're feeling physically, even your appearance. You know, you might be feeling a little bit better about that, or getting some support with that. And with Jupiter over there in your ninth, which is the house of things like long distance travel, foreign people and places, learning, teaching, our worldview, how we like our belief system. These are all ninth house things. So there's some kind of support going on here where, oh my gosh, there's so many different scenarios I could think of where maybe you might meet like a teacher or somebody that can give you support with yourself and your, maybe your physical body or something like that. Those first house themes that's in a really pleasant, supportive, that the relationship has a pleasant, supportive kind of vibe. It could be you thinking about, like, you may, let's say this, you may have an easier time kind of expressing your worldview, your philosophy, like sort of being out with it, kind of, out showing the world that side of yourself. There may be more ease and flow there. There could be some pleasant kind of news around people at a distance, or some travel plans that you might have. There could be like if you're finishing some sort of a course of study or a program, at college or university or whatever, and maybe you're graduating with some kind of, so this makes you, you have some letters beside your name now, or some new title. So that's like a way of how the world sees you, right? Is changing in some way. There's a lot of different things, but it's that house of travel, of philosophy, of worldview, of teaching, learning, in a supportive alignment, right? Jupiter there, growth, expansion, optimism, joy, in this supportive alignment with Venus in your first house. So, yeah. I could say so much more, but I think I'm going to leave that there for you, Cancer, and we're going to move on to Leo now. I find myself very, very verbose in these videos lately, so I hope that's okay with you, but I could go on and on and on. So next we're going to go to Leo, where Leo, you have Venus in your 12th house, entering your 12th house, and joining Mars there, and then you've got Jupiter in your 8th house, right? Which is Pisces for you. So we've talked in a past video about the Jupiter and Pisces thing. So you can go back and watch the Jupiter and Pisces video for more sort of depth on that and what Jupiter and Pisces, Jupiter moving through your 8th house means for you specifically. But in terms of this configuration with with Venus in Cancer trining Jupiter in Pisces, there is this support going on for you between two pretty intense houses, really, in the chart. So the 12th house, which is where Venus is entering, and where Mars has been, without the gentleness of Venus present for a while, in your house of endings, of loss, of your sense of spiritual and mental well-being. The 12th house is like, it's the chaos in life, right? It's the things that are hard to pin down. It can have to do with your spiritual life, but it's also very much related to those ways in which we sabotage ourselves, our bad habits, and maybe those are coming from an unconscious place. Secrets is the 12th house. The 12th house is things that go on behind closed doors, and things that, sometimes literally places that are tucked away from the world. Institutions like hospitals and spiritual retreat centers and prisons and rehabilitation facilities. These kinds of institutions may play a role when we're talking about the 12th house. And then you've got Venus moving in there to lend some support, to cushion that the fiery heat, that Mars has been bringing to Cancer, that steaminess, whatever's been going on there with Mars in Cancer, right? That inflammation. You've got Venus coming in there to kind of calm things down a bit and have this nice conversation with Jupiter and Pisces in your 8th house, which has to do with other people's resources, other people's money, with things like taxes, insurance, wills, inheritance. 8th house is excuse me, the house of transformation. It's the house of quite literally, like it was sort of thought of as the house of death and taxes, right? Like it's not the warm fuzzy subjects that we'd rather focus on, but it's a natural part of life and life cycles. And the 8th house I very much see as being our entanglements with other people. And so it's like resources we share, but intimacy on other levels as well. And sometimes, our psychological wounding and healing. And usually we have psychological wounding and because of other people or in relation to other people and our entanglements with them, right? So nevertheless, these are the two houses that are in this configuration with Jupiter and Venus. And so whatever's been going on can get a sense of, the hand of sort of divine grace can come in and support you there. Maybe like in quite a literal sense. And this does not mean that every Leo rising is going to experience this. So I don't want you to think this, but in a very literal sense, this could be, somebody passing away and an inheritance being left. This can be maybe like if we're talking about maybe like healthcare, or somebody's having to spend time in the hospital or in a rehab facility or something, and somehow the money comes through like a loan or a remortgaging of a house or something like that. Or there can be, you know, you meet somebody that can help you sort of in some way deal with paying off debts. There can be like secret sort of intimate relationships that are going on as well with this influence. But because it's a trine, it is, you know, something that's not necessarily kind of taboo, or it can be supportive. So, you know, again, I could always go on and on and on, but now that you know, what are 8th house themes, what are 12th house themes, these, you know, the Venus in the 12th and Jupiter in the 8th are working together here to support whatever's going on between these two houses. And so I'm going to leave it there for you, Leo. We're going to move on to Virgo now. Virgo, for you, you've got Venus moving into your 11th house of friends, groups, allies, networks, that kind of thing. And Jupiter is in your 7th house of one-to-one relationships, right? Close personal relationships, contracts and agreements. So whatever's going on here involves, and it's supportive because the two benefics, right? Venus in Cancer, Jupiter in Pisces, two benefics working together. So it's a nice thing. It's a supportive thing. It's like I said, it's like the sort of hand of divine grace, right? Bringing us a bit of a cushion. And so this can be things like, Venus in Cancer in the 11th, like groups of women. And then Jupiter in the 7th house, one-to-one relationships. Jupiter is growth and expansion. Maybe there are some personal relationships forming from friendship groups that feel supportive. This could be things like you can meet an ally that somehow offers you some kind of a contract that is really hopeful, and allows you some, sort of abundance kind of thing. This can be growing a supportive network of people in some way as well. This can be like some sort of like reunion with like a friends reunion or something like that. Friends reunion. That's funny because literally the Friends reunion show just happened, right? I haven't seen it, but that just came to mind. But I mean, for you personally, it could be some sort of friends reunion that's in the works or that goes on in some way. Okay, so I think that gives you enough to go on there, Virgo. And, think about your own life. Like, what's happening in this arena of friends? And maybe there's been some inflammation there because Mars has been in there without the help of Venus for a while. But now Venus is coming in to kind of smooth things over a little bit. And then getting the support of Jupiter, who is, this hit of optimism and abundance and joy kind of thing. All right, so we're going to move on to Libra. Libra, for you, you have Venus moving into your 10th house, joining Mars there, and you've got Jupiter in your 6th, right? And so we did a Jupiter in Pisces video a few weeks ago, and you can go back and listen to that if you want some real kind of insight into Jupiter moving through your 6th house. But in this case, Venus is moving into your 10th house, where Mars has been there for a little bit and maybe causing some kind of inflammation in terms of your career, your public reputation and persona, your legacy, right? Your relationship to authority in some ways. And now Venus is moving in there and calming things down a little bit, smoothing things over. I'm going to come and kind of schmooze a little bit in the 10th house, and settle things down there a bit and give you some support despite that Mars-Pluto that we were talking about. Hopefully you've listened to the introduction and you know what I mean. And then you've got Jupiter, the other benefic, in your 6th house of your daily routine of work, your day-to-day work kind of thing, of the checking off the ticky boxes kind of stuff, whether it be paid or unpaid, of health and pets, of subordinates, employees, that kind of thing. So, but very much work, like daily work and health is the 6th house. And then 10th house is career, your more public life and this sense of more, the material kind of security that comes through your career, as opposed to sort of the more private, sort of emotional kind of stuff that's going on in the 4th house opposite. So for you, this is this moment of grace that happens here between the 10th and the 6th houses, right? And so there could have been some difficulties transpiring in your 10th house with Mars there, this, a bit of inflammation, maybe even a lot of activity. And now Venus and Jupiter are letting you kind of catch your breath and maybe get into a groove. Like maybe if you've changed jobs, and you're maybe going to catch a break in terms of like getting into the routine, or people in your work are supporting you're meeting people that feel like they have your back, right? That are really supportive in some way. And this can also involve resources. So, what if you've had a career move, or maybe the work that's been going in the 6th house is paying off somehow in terms of your career, and maybe you're getting a raise, or maybe you were out of work for a while and you've got some opportunity now for work, and so that's improving things for you in some way. This could be so let's take it in a different direction. It could be like you connect with somebody who might be an authority in some way that helps you with some kind of health issue, or with your work in some way. But and there's this flow that goes on. So all right, so I think that's good, Libra. I think that gives you something to go on for sure. And you just think about like what's going on in my life in relation to my career, my work, my daily routine, my health. And this is where Venus and Jupiter, the two benefics, are bringing you some support this week. Okay. Next, we have Scorpio. So Scorpio, for you, you've got Venus moving into your 9th house and Jupiter sitting there in your 5th house. And we did a Jupiter in Pisces video a while back. And so if you want to go back and listen to that, you can get more information about what does Jupiter going through the 5th house mean for me, right? And I'll link to that below. But in relation to this situation we've got going on here with Venus and Jupiter, you have the two benefics in these houses that are bringing you some support, some divine kind of grace in some way. And so 9th house is travel, It is learning and teaching. It is your worldview, your belief system. Um, and then the fifth house is children. It is what brings you joy and pleasure. It is your individual sort of creative self-expression. It's hobbies and, special interests like that, that allow you to have fun or bring you joy. It can be sports. Fifth house is like that sense of childhood enthusiasm, but things revolving around children and the more pleasant things in life, right? And so these two things are getting a boost with Jupiter and Venus here. And so, Mars in the ninth house for a while without Jupiter's presence there could have been a lot of activity going on in relation to education, or travel in some way, even if it's armchair travel. It can have to do with, or some sort of like, way we see the world, our viewpoint. So Mars has been sort of inflaming that area of life and kind of not really comfortable there. And now Venus is coming in to smooth things over a little bit there. And that might be in the form of an actual person that you encounter, say through your education or through travel or from a distance, like a person or somebody who's involved in even politics or religion or, somebody that is a bit of a teacher or a wise one in some way and giving you some support, right? And somehow that is working well with that fifth house area where Jupiter is bringing you some hope and some expansion and some joy and abundance regarding children, the fun things in life, all those things I mentioned. There could be something like, so if you're a parent, for example, this could be some good news around school and your kids or your kids' education in some way, around kids and travel, around even teaching kids, around creativity and learning, so all those themes are being triggered in a good way by Venus and Jupiter. And also working to smooth things over a little bit between that Mars-Pluto opposition that's happening as well. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely listen to the intro because you don't want to miss that piece. Okay, so that's for you, Scorpio. We're going to move to Sagittarius now, where you have the 8th and the 4th houses being lit up by Venus moving into Cancer to your 8th house and Jupiter sitting there in your 4th house. So we've done a past video on Jupiter and Pisces, and you can go back and listen to that. I'll put the link below, and you can get a sense of, what's Jupiter and Pisces about for me. And then you've got Venus moving there into your 8th house. So Mars has been in your 8th house for a while without Venus's presence. And so it's been kind of like, the phrase I keep using is Mars has been sort of inflaming that Cancer house, right? Which is the 8th house for you. And now Venus is coming in and just kind of smoothing things over a little, offering a bit of support and working in harmony with the other benefic, Jupiter, that's over there in Pisces in your 4th house. So for you, these are the houses of other people's resources, which is the 8th house. So other people's time, money, energy, very much things like debt, taxes, insurance, wills, inheritance, bursaries, loans, mortgages, all of those things. But also the 8th house speaks to your intimate entanglements with other people, right? And those like deep psychological kind of issues and wounding and healing, because those often come about via our entanglements with other people, right? So that 8th house, is getting this hit of Venus Venus bringing some support, could quite literally be like a person or a relationship in some way, or resources, right? And working in harmony with your fourth house of home, family, place of living, roots, ancestry, emotional security, where Jupiter is there trying to bring you some optimism for a change, because, Jupiter's better able to do its job in Pisces than it has been for quite a long time. So, because it was in Saturn's signs of Aquarius and Capricorn, right? So, and it's moving back to Aquarius just for a little bit there in July for the rest of the year. But then we're going to get another longer transit of Jupiter in Pisces starting at the end of this year. So you're getting a glimpse of what that's about. But in relation to this conversation here with Venus and Jupiter, it's between the 8th and the 4th houses. So whatever's been going on there, like maybe you meet a great real estate agent who sells your house for top dollar. Maybe you are able to remortgage your house and, use that money to improve it, to improve your place of living. Maybe there's been some, this can involve inheritance potentially as well, or maybe working something going on like in the 4th house, like a work from home project or something like that is allows you to get a handle on, maybe paying off some debt or something like that. Many ways this could play out, as always, but it's the 8th and 4th houses that are being lit up, like I said, by these two benefics. So, and giving a bit of a cushion, like we mentioned in the intro, to that Mars-Pluto opposition that's going on. So, okay, so I'm going to leave that for you, Sagittarius. I'm going to move to Capricorn now, where we have the 7th house and the 3rd house that are being lit up by Venus and Jupiter. So Jupiter's in your 3rd house in Pisces. And we have a whole separate video. I did a separate video on that you can go listen to. I'll put the link below. That, if you don't already know sort of what Jupiter and Pisces means for you, then you can check that out and get a greater sense. And then, so as Venus moves into your 7th house, where Mars has been sitting for a little bit, Venus will smooth things over in terms of your close personal relationships, right? If there's been a bit of inflammation going on there, or even sometimes, it could be like a lot of activity or drive, or aggression even. Mars can bring those things, right? In your 7th house of one-to-one relationships, and contracts and agreements as well. Then Venus coming in there can just kind of calm things down a little bit and bring a bit of support. And that could come in the form of a person, of some resources, in some way. So, and it's working, right? This Venus in your 7th house is working in harmony with Jupiter in the 3rd house, which has to do with your siblings, your community members, your neighbors, the people that feel like siblings, your immediate environment, your communications, your 3rd house is also a house of teaching and learning. It is about things like commerce. So those are the themes that Jupiter is ultimately bringing you a sense of optimism and growth and expansion to. And then when Venus comes in to the 7th house, it hits that trine to Jupiter, and it's like this welcome kind of, some cooling waters there, or some thirst quenching that's going on, right? Like I talked about in the introduction, between your one-to-one relationships and your 3rd house of all those themes I just mentioned. So, and bringing, hopefully allowing a bit of relief to whatever's being triggered by the Mars-Pluto opposition that we spoke about in the introduction. All right, so I'm going to leave you with that, Capricorn, and I'm going to move on to Aquarius now, where Aquarius, for you, you have Venus moving into your 6th house, which is where Cancer sits for you, and you have Jupiter sitting in your 2nd house, right? So Jupiter's in your 2nd house for until the end of July, and then we'll be back in there for a longer haul at the end of this year in December. So if you want to know, if you want more insight as to what that's about for you, I've done a separate video on that, and I'll link it below, and you can check that out. But Jupiter is the great benefic, right? So bringing ultimately good things, but bringing growth and expansion and optimism and that sort of thing. Of course, there's always the risk of too much of a good thing with Jupiter, but which I talked about in my Jupiter and Pisces video. But you've got Jupiter there in your 2nd house, and then your 6th house is where Venus is entering, which is, okay, so let's break this down. 6th house is your health and wellness. 6th house is your work, your daily work, the daily grind, work that you do on the day-to-day, whether it's through a paid job or, work you do at home kind of thing, labor, toil, that sort of thing. And 6th house, but very much about, your health and illness, can have to do with pets as well. And then, so Venus is entering there, and there may have been some kind of Mars has been in there in the 6th house without Venus's presence, kind of inflaming things and feeling a bit prickly in that area of life. And then Venus comes in and, brings some cooling, brings some smoothing over of whatever is transpiring in the 6th house. And then Venus is going to have this pleasant conversation with the other benefic, Jupiter, over in Pisces in your 2nd house of resources, of money, of, the money you make from your skills and talents, of your sense of worth and self-worth and what you place worth on, of how you get your basic needs met. And so, this could be like, so you could have some encounters in your daily work that lead to greater financial abundance. And that might come in the form of a person who you hit it off with and then, is able to help you. It may be something surrounding your health and wellness, or health and wellness in general, that is beneficial to, again, your resources, or, those two things working in harmony in some way. This can be I'm trying to think of another potential scenario here. Things like I get a sense of people that working in the wellness industry in some way, and whatever that is working in harmony with your 2nd house of resources and helping, your resources are growing as a result of whatever that is. I can even see this as something like you go to a spa weekend with some friends, maybe some female friends, with it being Venus in the 6th house there, so but you have the money to do it, Jupiter in the 2nd, or maybe somebody treats you to that kind of a thing. So those are some potential scenarios for you. Sixth house, just on it, like it can sometimes be about pets as well. So there could be something going on as far as pets and resources, but that is pleasant in some way, or supportive ultimately in some way. So, okay, I think that's good, Aquarius. And then, of course, in the intro, we spoke more about the Mars-Pluto opposition, because Mars is sitting in that sixth house and it's going to oppose Pluto across the sky. But this Venus-Jupiter configuration is like a cushion, right? So listen to the intro for all the details. And we're going to move to Pisces now, where Pisces we have Venus moving into your fifth house of children, of what brings you joy and pleasure, of romance, of fertility even, of hobbies, sports. All those are fifth house things. And then Jupiter sitting there in your first house of you, of self, of your physical body and vitality, of your like how you are perceived by the world, how you come at the world, that sort of thing. And Jupiter in your first, I spoke about in the Jupiter and Pisces video a few weeks ago, and I'll put the link to that below if you want to dive deeper into that if you haven't yet. But then Venus is coming into your fifth house, where Mars has been sitting without Venus's presence, right? And so Mars has been kind of inflaming that area of the chart, and then Venus is coming in to smooth things over, right? To bring that kind of feminine touch, if you will, to bring more harmony and ease to that area of life than maybe you've been feeling for a little while, and ultimately working in harmony with Jupiter in your first house. And so I see this as potentially, like, here's a few scenarios for you. Good news around children, maybe pregnancy. So if that's not something that you are desiring, just be mindful of that. This could be around just honestly, it could be like you're finally able to have more fun than you've had in a while, and it really has an impact on your overall kind of well-being, and your sense of vitality in some way. This could be some kind, like getting maybe some recognition for your creative work in some way, and that is, it allows you to be, to be seen in a different light, in a more positive light, or in a way that's like grows your presence in some way. So those are some few scenarios I can think of. And when I say you're creative, like, creative work, it could be also related to like sports in some way as well. But I think like that's generally what you've got going on there, right? And there's still going to be like the Mars-Pluto opposition that's coming. Mars is in your fifth house. It's going to oppose Pluto in the 11th house for you. But it's this Venus-Jupiter, like Venus moving into the fifth and then having this nice conversation with Jupiter is like it's dousing the intensity of that in some way. It's a soft place to land in some way. It's a cushion, like we were talking about in the introduction. So definitely listen to the intro if you haven't yet. Okay, so Pisces, I will leave that there for you, and I'll move to Aries now, where we have Venus moving into your fourth house, which is where Cancer sits for you, Aries, and Jupiter sitting in your 12th house, right? Jupiter moved into your 12th. We did a separate video on that, so I'll put the link below, and you can, if you haven't listened to that video yet, you can get a greater sense of what the Jupiter and Pisces transit through the 12th is about for you. Jupiter and Venus are the two benefics. We spoke about that in the intro here. And so they are working in harmony and supporting each other and bringing a sense of ease and flow in some way between your fourth house of home, family, roots, place of living, emotional security, ancestry, potentially, like your lineage in some way. And the 12th house of endings, losses, of self-sabotaging behaviors, of the unconscious, of your spiritual health and your spiritual life, your mental wellness, your like what goes on behind closed doors, how you spend time in retreat and recovery and reflection and solitude, in convalescence even sometimes. And so the 12th house is also related on a more practical level to things like hospitals and spiritual retreat centers and prisons and rehabilitation facilities and all of those kinds of things, right? Places that are sort of tucked away from the world. And so there's a sense here of, there's been some irritation in the fourth house that Mars has brought. So in that house of home, roots, family, lineage, all of that, there's been some inflammation, some irritation. And now Venus is coming in there to, with the sort of divine grace, with an opportunity to smooth things over, or with some support in some way, in that fourth house, and then working in harmony with Jupiter, who is looking to bring some healing and expansion and potentially some wisdom, and some luck, to that 12th house and those 12th house themes. So it's like difficulties on the home front, like there may have been losses or illnesses or things like that. There's some healing. There's a potential for some healing, whatever that's been for you. You may encounter people that help you through that process, and they may even be family members, or people that really feel like your tribe in some way. There is a sense of even things like making your space feel like more of a sanctuary in some way. There could be spiritual work going on, in a place that feels like home. There could even be some kind of resources that are coming to you through a loss, or there could be something support for some kind of like a convalescence. Like this could even be like, like an elderly family member who needs some kind of support, and because they're convalescing in some way. I don't know why that word keeps coming to mind. And so there is support there, for that person, in some way. So, okay. I think that's enough to go on. And of course, there's that Mars, I think I mentioned that Mars-Pluto opposition, as well, can be quite triggery, but this Venus-Jupiter configuration is cooling things down a bit, maybe making them a little bit less heated and intense. So, listen to the intro, Aries, definitely, because you don't want to miss that. So I'm going to move on to Taurus now. We're getting on to the almost hour 40-minute mark here. So Taurus, we're going to move on to you, and we're going to talk about the 3rd and the 11th houses, because you have Venus moving into your 3rd house, of your immediate environment, of siblings, of people that feel like siblings, cousins, peers, neighbors, community. 3rd house speaks to communications, to commerce, to marketing, to teaching and learning, usually of sort of like the earlier years, or the learning the basics kind of thing. And then you have, so you've got Venus moving in there to join Mars. And so coming in to kind of to smooth things over a little bit, to help out whatever situation may have been inflamed in that third house for you. And then working in support with Jupiter in your 11th house. And so I did a video on Jupiter in Pisces, right, which is the 11th house for you. And I'll put the link below if you haven't listened to that yet. It will give you more context. And so these two, this third and 11th house are getting to work in harmony for a little while, and to bring a sort of cooling effect and a quenching effect, and a calming, an uplifting effect in some way. And the 11th house, we talked about the third already. The 11th house is the group. It's your friends. It's your alliances. It's networks. It's, the people that can kind of help you reach your goals. And so this could be like somebody coming in, like a sibling, or somebody that feels like a sibling, or a peer or something like that, coming in and lending you some support. It could be like, I just had this idea of like somebody like that helps you create a website that allows you to connect with a bigger network of people, right? 11th house, to grow your network. Or helps you with your marketing or something like that, or your communications in some way. This could be like resources come in to help you do that. This could be support for like teaching and learning in a, to the group. This could be, let me think of another, let's take it in another direction. This could have to do with some sort of short trip that you take to connect with friends, if you haven't been able to do that for quite a while. That just feels really nice and pleasant. So yeah, group communications could feel better than they have in a little while. So those are all things to take a look at, like take a look towards like what's happening in relation to these third house themes in my life, maybe what has been happening with Mars moving through there, and now with Venus coming in, it's lending a bit of lightness there, and then working in harmony with Jupiter and Pisces in your 11th. And then of course there's that Mars Pluto going on that we talked about in the intro, so for sure listen to the intro, so as not to miss any important context. All right, and last but not least in this instance, we've got Gemini. And Gemini, for you have Venus moving into your second house and giving you a boost in terms of your resources, your personal resources, the money you make from, your job, or the money you make from your skills and talents. Your personal resources can also be your time and energy. This can be about how you get your basic needs met. It's what you value, how you place worth on, self-worth kind of thing, is your second house. And so this area was getting, inflamed by Mars over the last little while. And so now Venus is coming in there to kind of smooth things over a little, and add a bit of, quenching to that area. And then we've got Jupiter over there in Pisces in your 10th house of career, of public reputation, of legacy, the legacy you wish to leave, of authority, these kinds of things. Really trying to bring a hit of optimism and good fortune and joy and growth there. And so now these two areas get the opportunity to support each other and to work in harmony ultimately, right? Venus in the second, Jupiter in the 10th. This is like This could be things like a raise. This could be things like this can even be like I don't know what just came to mind. Sometimes the weirdest things go on up here, but I almost get the sense of like you could be like, you know, becoming an antique dealer, or somebody is like there's some like money coming in through like material possessions in some way, or there's something going on in your like in relation to your career and your kind of material resources. Or, you know, somebody, you could meet somebody that allows you to, or that gives you the support you need with your personal resources. You know, that then allows you a greater sense of kind of abundance in terms of your, you know, the legacy you wish to leave, or there could be your sense of authority with whatever you do in the world, out in the world, is growing because of Jupiter being in there, and that is impacting your resources, right? Your personal resources somehow. So those are some ways I can see that playing out for you personally, Gemini. You know, you've got the Mars Pluto opposition obviously happening as well, with the second and the eighth house, and we spoke about that in the introduction. So, but you know, listen to that for sure. But then you've got Venus Jupiter as the cushion, quenching this in some way, bringing some support. Like I said in the intro, it's like that, you know, a moment of like the hand of divine grace kind of coming in and kind of putting a little cushion down for us, a soft place to land sort of thing. So, okay, that's all 12 signs. Wow, that was a long one. We cried, we laughed, right? Oh my gosh. Yeah, so sorry if that was intense for you. It was intense for me too, but I hope this brings you some enlightenment and some insight into what is on the horizon and what's going on for us and for you personally. And I will catch you next week, where we're going to talk all about the eclipse in Gemini. Okay, don't forget astrologymaven.com. Go sign up. Okay, take care. Bye for now.